Women in Tech panel, navigating the day-to-day of being a woman in tech. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah. I'm the lead engineering instructor for the New York program. I'm also a senior software engineer at Codesmith as well, and I work in our code bases on CSX, our public site, our internal tools, all that good stuff. I'm so excited about this discussion tonight. I think getting more women into tech and kind of breaking down those barriers is something I'm really passionate about. And I think the only way we can really inspire each other is by being honest about our experiences and sharing perspective and supporting one another on the journey. So before we get started with questions, I'd love to introduce you to all of our panelists. We have 4 lovely women here, Taylor, Sam, Lucia, and Monica. So I will be calling on each of one of you. I would love if you could just tell us, your name, where you're tuning in from, your role, and what company you work for, as well as how long you've been in the role and kind of like what your work is. So Taylor, I saw you on mute. I'm going to throw it over to you first.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm coming at you from LA, rainy LA today. I am an iOS engineer at Square. I've been an iOS engineer for about 6 years, and I also did a boot camp, not Codesmith, but I solidarity with boot campers here. In my current role at Square, I work on our help tooling, basically. So for anyone that's ever seen that little white reader at farmers markets or festivals, for small businesses to take payments, we provide the tools whenever they need support with the app, something's not working. And so we build that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Taylor. Samantha, I'm going to throw it over to you next. Do you prefer Sam or Samantha?
Either or. I'm used to
Okay,
both.
Amazing. We'll switch it up then. All right.
Sounds good. Keep me on my toes. Keep me on my toes. Yeah, so I'm Samantha. I am on the East Coast, just outside of DC, in Silver Spring, Maryland. I work at NPR as a software engineer. And I'm a Codesmith grad. I graduated the Codesmith program and in September 2019. This is my second job out of Codesmith. My first job was at a small startup in LA, and then NPR came calling about 2 months in, and I had wanted to work at NPR for years. So off I went, and I work on a tool, an internal facing tool called Newsflex. And it is the program that our newsroom and our producers use to plan and get their shows ready for air. And it actually runs while they're live on air.
Amazing. That's so cool. Thank you so much, Sam. Lucia, I'm going to throw it over to you next.
Hi, nice to meet you all, and thank you for having me. I am an engineer on Google Maps, and I work on iOS mostly. So very similar work to Taylor, I think, probably. And actually, my last day at Google is going to be tomorrow, and I'm changing companies and joining a startup. This is new news as of last week, and I'm joining a company called Sandbox AQ. We're also looking very much to diversify our team. So if anyone's interested, you feel free to reach out to me after. And I am calling from San Francisco. And I'll pass it over to Monica.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. Oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Monica.
My name is Monica. I also live in Los Angeles. I also work at Square, but I am an Android developer, and my team works on the main point of sale app. So we handle everything from the keypad where you enter in the amount that you're charging to the tutorials that you can interact with for connecting different pieces of hardware, and sometimes even managing those hardware connections themselves.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Monica. All right, well, we will jump in. I think, first and foremost, we kind of want to know a little bit about female leadership in tech and what do your teams look like in regards to gender? Do you collaborate with other women? Are there women in positions of tech leadership within your company? So Lucia, I'm going to throw it over to you first.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because I feel like you can start off with a team and have no women, and then it's very hard to get more women to join. But as soon as you kind of get a couple of women, then more women want to join. So my team started and we were about 1/4 women in the team, and now we're about a half. So we kind of, like, the women in the team started, encouraging other women to join. I feel like people, once they see, people that are similar to them or a more diverse team, they're more willing to go there. And there's a lot of mentorship and leadership in my team that are women and non-binary. So it's been really, really exciting to see that growth.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. I love what you said about, when you see yourself or a little bit of yourself in someone, it makes you want to join in too. I think that's so, so true. Taylor, I'm going to throw it over to you next.
Yeah, I actually have a female manager for the first time. And this is my third engineering job. And I actually chose Square and the team because of this manager. I was given a choice between 3 or 4 teams, and I chose this. I was like, I got to go with the female manager. It's so refreshing. And everything since then, I started in August. Everything since then has proven that I made the right choice with her. On our first day, she was like, do you like taking naps? Just relax, take naps. Don't get stressed. She's also a mom. So she's, she just understands being a human and really values us being humans as well. We'll come back from our, we'll come back from the holiday break and the first day, it's so anxiety inducing to come back to work after a long break. And in our first stand-up, she's like, yeah, my brain still is not working. So just give me a little bit. If your brain's not working, it's okay. Just being a human and not being this perfect robot, especially women too, sometimes in leadership positions feel like they have to be perfect and super buttoned up. And to just see someone be themselves and be human enables me to also do that. And it just creates this environment of psychological safety and a team that realizes that people make mistakes, people are human, and gives you leeway to do that. So I hadn't experienced quite the same thing with male managers, even though I didn't have bad experiences, but this is a new level and it's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Taylor. Yeah, I was talking to a woman a couple of weeks ago who was an engineering manager, and it's just so rare to find women, especially in positions of engineering management. So that's super awesome. Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you next.
Yeah. So when I joined my team, there were let's see, my team in and of itself is pretty small. I think there's only 9 of us, and when I first started, there were 4 women on the team. One woman has since left to go on to a different opportunity, so now there's 3 of us. But my team's pretty close knit, and they've 2 of us are relatively new. Everyone else has been there 10 plus years. So it's been interesting to see us as the new blood come in and kind of bring those ideas of hey, let's think about how we want our team to look in the future, how we want it to change, etc. All that to say, there are plenty of women in leadership position or management positions throughout NPR, just not specifically on my team. But that is something that my male boss and I have talked about in regards to me, plotting out whether or not if that's a role that I'm interested in, giving me opportunities to see whether or not, kind of test drive and see if that's something I might be interested in the future. And then NPR is interesting because while we're specifically talking about tech in a software development sense, because NPR is also radio, there's the tech side of broadcasting, and there are several women in leadership positions and the broadcasting side of the organization as well. So there are definitely examples, and in the newsroom. So all throughout NPR, that something that they have focused a lot on is getting women into different roles throughout the organization.
Awesome. And Sam, that kind of leads me, well, Monica, I'm going to let you go next too, but Sam, something you said, I'm going to come back to it in a second when we go to our next question.
Okay, cool. So I just joined Square actually in October, and I came from another software engineering role where I'd been for the past 5 years, but at a smaller company. And I think I've already met more women engineers than I ever did in those last 5 years. And one thing that's been really awesome is we have a huge women engineering employee resource group. And it's so big that we actually break it down for anyone who's interested. You can join sort of smaller subgroups that are called arrays, which is really cute. And mine just met for the first time on Friday. And you can actually select when you're choosing or when you're volunteering to sign up if you want to be in one that's more focused on, like leveling up and career growth, or one that's just focused on socialization. And I chose the one to just like chat with people, especially because I'm in LA where they don't have an office. And so I'm 100% remote. And it was really nice. We did end up talking a little bit about just, like the ecosphere of being a woman in tech, because how can you not? We all are, and we were all still at work. But it was also just a very nice, low-key conversation where, we weren't trying to like save the world or like solve any problems. And it was just, 5 women hanging out in the middle of the day having a like water cooler style chat.
I love that. Yeah, I think it's nice too that there's the option to talk about growth and career development, but also just like spend time with other women who share similar experiences to you. It's also really important. Thank you so much for sharing, Monica. Kind of on this same topic, I think one of the big conversations that is happening and I'm seeing right now in women in tech is the push for more women in leadership roles. And I know all of you touched on this a little bit in your initial answers, but from your experience or conversation you've had with your colleagues or even former colleagues, what do you think companies are doing or should be doing or could be doing to help nurture and guide, career growth specifically in women? So Sam, I'm going to throw it over to you first, because it sounds like you might have like some personal experience with that.
Well, one thing that I really appreciate is that the fact that my boss asked me if I'm interested. And I don't think women or maybe anyone really gets asked that question. I think a lot of the time management roles just get handed over to you because you're expected. That's the next thing in the career ladder, right? So like, here you go. And you might not want to be a manager. You might not be equipped to be a manager. Not everyone is meant to be a people manager. So I appreciate that he asked me, and then creating opportunities that he's working on creating for me to see if that's going to be the right fit for me and my career. So I think finding ways to do that for women and non-binary folks and people of color, like just giving opportunities to kind of experiment and see like what options are available to you. And NPR has also made it its mission. It's called our North Star to really work on diversity, equity, and inclusion at NPR. And so everything that we're doing, both internally facing and externally facing, is driving toward that goal. And while no organization is perfect, NPR is very much seeming to put its money where its mouth is. So it is funding initiatives to help drive that. And so I think that's important. It's one thing for companies to say, hey, we want to bring in more women, or we want to bring in more people of color, we want to bring in more non-binary folks. But unless you're also providing money and funds to do that, and then also giving them a space once they're there, right? Like you can't just tick the box and say someone's, okay, great, we've added more women. Are you also then giving them an environment in which they can succeed? Are you giving them a manager that treats them like a human being, that understands after, like Taylor was saying, after a long break, your brain's not going to be 100% going the next day, right? Like, are you creating this environment in which people who have not normally been in this space can succeed? And that also requires like dedication and patience, and again, funds. Like you can't get away from any of this. Like this stuff is going to cost money, and I think that's where a lot of organizations tend to fall short, is because they're concerned about that bottom dollar. But like at the end of the day, if you provide this a place where people want to stay, your bottom dollar is going to be stronger because there'll be less turnover, and you're going to be bringing in more voices from different backgrounds that will just help your company grow. Sorry, that was a long answer.
That was a great answer. Thank you so much, Sam. Taylor, I'll throw it over to you. I saw you just unmuted.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I feel like I have a little bit of a different take on this question, because when you think about women in leadership, you think of like Sam was saying, those like people leadership skills, those social communication, collaboration skills that women tend to actually be better at. And I find that actually I see more women in engineering leadership than women at the really high individual contributor levels. Like they're not getting to those architecture, like really like lead technical decision maker. And, you know, when you're thinking about like just having a great job and having a lot of power in the industry, like those people do have that power, even if it's not like a leadership people role. So I think it's important to also think about that track as well. And what we have at Square, which I love, is an engineering rubric that, you know, every single engineer is being graded off of for your level, and you know the exact competencies for the next level. And half of those competencies really are those like soft skills that we think of: communication, collaboration, team building, mentorship, things that a lot of people, especially men that came through computer science degrees, who have been in the industry for 10 years may not have as much. A lot of us boot campers have that because we had a job before. Like I was a teacher before. We've gone through so many different career changes that we've built those skills. But a lot of times, if you've just been an engineer for 10 years, you may not, because you're kind of sitting at your computer doing your engineering work. All that to say, having a really like structured way to promote people makes sure that you don't have men who may be louder to their managers saying, I want to be promoted, I want more money. And you have this this like level playing field. And we actually have to create these packets for ourselves and fill in something called a hype doc, where we just detail all the projects we've been working on and how we're hitting all those competencies. And it goes to a board of people who sit on that board, who are at those high levels that kind of evaluate your progress. So it's not really up to that one person that you can sway and say, I want more money, like give me this. It's really like an equitable, like, have you met these criteria that we're judging everyone on? And then we also have like the same exact salary bands that are publicized. So again, when you're getting that job, you can't say, oh, well, I want this amount because I can get that at this place. They're like, okay, sorry, like this is what everyone is making. So we don't have that pay discrepancy. And so yeah, standardizing that I think is super important.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Taylor. Lucia.
Yeah, I honestly think those are really, really great answers. And I completely agree with both. The only thing that I would maybe add is having some support system or some kind of like the women that have, you know, reached these positions of leadership or high technical IC positions, which by the way, I completely agree. And at Google, I actually see that a lot. We do have a standard rubric, but even still, the very deeply technical women are harder to find than the women in engineering management, which is kind of interesting that that's the case. But we have some kind of programs in which you have more senior women that are maybe managers or maybe just more senior, and have like small cohorts with like other more junior women and kind of talk to them through their career progression. I think like having someone that is in a similar position to you, that you kind of can take guidance from, and they can help you figure out these like moments of maybe insecurities or how to navigate certain situations. At least for me, that I was part of that program has been really helpful. And actually my leader in that cohort was actually a man. Most of them, like 90% of them, were women because it was a program for women. And even still, it was, you know, I think you can also have really great support from men in this respect too.
Yeah, absolutely. Monica, I know that Taylor shared a lot about Square, but I'm wondering if there's anything else you want to kind of add about what that looks like to you, or what you've seen, or maybe something from a prior role.
Yeah, I can share an anecdote from a previous company I was in, which is kind of a not great situation that I was in. Recently, I've been fortunate to have a couple really great managers who have been very proactive in helping me work towards promotion and always holding me accountable and keeping me communicating really well as to what the next steps were. But that wasn't always the case. And I also understand that that's often, unfortunately, not the case for people who don't necessarily get that from their manager. And I was in a situation once where I was trying to get promoted and I was kind of led to believe that it would happen, and then it didn't. And my manager's advice to me was to go and get a job offer from another company and then come back and use that as leverage, which sure, that's like that's certainly something you can do, but coming from a manager who is, you know, like a vessel for the company, it was really disappointing to hear. So I think if you're in a similar boat where you don't feel like your manager is your best advocate, it doesn't mean there's not someone else at the company who could be a better advocate for you. It might be a little more work to find the right person, but I think it will pay off for sure if you can find someone else who can speak and advocate on your behalf, because that component is like super, super essential in getting ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having like processes and standards around like that advice you got from a manager. Wild. Thanks for sharing, Monica. I loved all those answers, and just like so many ways in which companies can nurture and grow, and that visibility I think is so important, so that we can see if there are pay discrepancies, we can see if there's pay equity. Kind of along that vein, in just terms of looking for jobs and trying to find the right fit. Imposter syndrome is something that I think, I mean, every human struggles with it, right? But I think if you're the minority in a space, whether, whatever that may be, you can feel it even louder and even more than anyone else. Monica and Taylor, actually, for those of you who don't know, they have a podcast called Imposter that is all about imposter syndrome and bringing more humility and vulnerability and openness to the world of tech. So definitely go check that out. But I'm curious, imposter syndrome can be such a huge challenge when applying to jobs. And this is like, exists outside of the software engineering world as well, of course, but I think as women, we specifically feel it in the tech world. And it can continue on even when you get the job, when you get that offer, when you start working at a company. So I'm curious, a lot of people who are probably joining us tonight either are planning on going through the program, or maybe trying to do a career change, or have done a career change. And I guess, what are some tips that you might have for those switching careers and moving into the software engineering world, or even those who are currently software engineers and are still feeling that imposter syndrome, or still feeling out of place? So I don't know who wants to go first. Anyone can kind of speak up.
I can jump in. So I would say a couple of things. First off, if you're taking a jump from one career to another, that's a really brave thing to do. And that shows that you have ambition and drive. And so while you might not know everything you think you need to know or want to know yet, the fact that you have that ambition and drive is that's really powerful. And you should try, and it's a lot easier said than done, try and take that into whether it be the Codesmith program or future interviews, and then your job once you land it, right? I think that can be a huge asset. My boss has said to me more than once, one of the reasons he wanted me for the job was my excitement and the fact that I show that I can learn and that I'm excited to learn, and that I'm not afraid to admit what I don't know. And I think that's another big thing is because you are, that imposter syndrome wants you to feel embarrassed about what you don't know. So you try to hide it and keep it down. And you might not ask the questions you need to be asking to get over that imposter feeling. And this is a lesson I've learned myself. And some days I still have to learn it again. Is just ask the question. If you're super blocked on something or you just don't understand, it's really, really okay not to know. In my interview for NPR, they asked me several questions. There was you know what? I don't know. And they laughed and thought that was awesome. They really appreciated it. So sometimes just admitting what you don't know and then asking a follow-up question, that can be all it takes. So it's, again, a lot easier said than done, but trying to turn that that imposter monster telling you don't use that, try to make a little bit of an advantage, be I don't know, please tell me more, I would like to learn, show you the strength of learning.
Go for it, Taylor.
Yeah, sorry, I keep doing that.
No, I love it. I mean that you have an answer that you want to share.
The secret, don't tell anyone I'm telling you this, guys. The secret is that you can always make up for what you may lack in tech skills by your communication and collaboration and soft skills that I keep mentioning. Like, there have been many more interviews where I've seen where a candidate does great on the technical portion, but displays a huge lack of awareness, is maybe even rude to the panel. And we say, absolutely not. Why would we can't work with someone like that? So don't, just like Sam said, you are bringing in skills from that prior career, and it takes so much courage and grit and like determination and show of curiosity that you have even chosen to make the switch. So really don't discount those qualities. And like Sam said, if you're in an interview and you really don't know, what they want to see is your thought process. Like, what steps do you go through? Do you sit there silently trying to solve it on your own? That's a no-no. Do you sit there saying, okay, here's what I'm thinking. It's taking me a bit, but this is reminding me of this problem I've seen before, like talk aloud as much as possible. And they may say like, yeah, maybe they're not there technically yet, but I can completely see how we could teach them. And that's like the biggest piece when people are looking to hire is like, can I work with that person? If there is some technical skill lacking, can we teach them? And the self-awareness, communication, collaboration, just really focus on that and presenting yourself in that way.
Sorry, I know I answered, but I want to add one more thing off of what Taylor just said, that if you're bringing in that previous experience. One of the projects I'm currently working on at NPR is a perfect Venn diagram of my previous 2 careers on top of now software engineering. I was previously a lawyer and a content producer, and now I am working on a rights management project. So it is literally all 3 of those things perfectly on top of each other. And like, had I been afraid to like bring that to the table in my interview, they wouldn't know that I would be the perfect person for this. So like Taylor was saying, those can be advantages. Like, talk about them, talk about how they are now applicable to software engineering, and not just out loud, like tell yourself that too. So sorry.
You don't have to apologize, Sam. Go for it, Lucia.
Yeah, I'll add also a little bit of a different spin to this. I feel like it's your manager in general, it's a manager's job to make the people in their team be successful at what they're doing. And that also, so it's not only on you. If you're not able to like, if you're failing, if you're not doing something right, if you're not comfortable, like that's also on the manager and on the team. So I think taking failures as like, I did this wrong, like that's not necessarily kind of, I think, the right framework to think about it, because then you blame yourself and kind of you dig yourself into a hole. And I think at least technically at Google we have this big culture on postmortems. So whenever you do something really bad, you have to write this doc, and it's not framed around like this is my fault. It's more around what was wrong with the system that it let me fail in this way. And we also have this culture of sharing it really broadly. So people are like, okay, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? And I think it's similar to kind of individually, like in your team, like how can you make a better environment for people to succeed? Is it better ramp up docs? Is it better meetings? Is it creating space for people that don't have a voice? So I think it's more like you're a team and you want to accomplish the same goal. If you kind of align that, it's not about your own kind of, it's about how you can grow into that position. And failing is okay. Everyone fails, and you can ask anyone, your mentors, your manager. I'm sure they have some great failures and things that did wrong to share with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Lucia. Monica, you want to add anything?
Sure, yeah. I want to go back to what Sam pointed out about just, like asking the dang question, if you have one, not only for yourself, but chances are somebody else has that question too. And it's really important, I think, to create that culture of like it being okay to ask questions, because Square right now is super collaborative and everyone is always asking questions, and it feels so much more curious and collaborative versus, I've been at a company before where I was a little bit intimidated to ask questions. I felt a little bit of pressure, like I always should know the answer. And part of that was because I had been there for so long, but it's really nice and refreshing to work with people who have been doing this for 9-10 years, who are, still just as confused as you are about something, but are willing to help you figure it out.
awesome. Yeah, I love that so much.
I have one thing to add to that, just because I used to be so afraid of asking questions. Like I really wanted to prove myself when I was a little bit earlier in my career, and I would spend hours and hours searching for the answer so I could like ask the question, but have then all this backup evidence. I did this, just to show that I am competent. But sometimes that ends up, and that's a good skill for sure. That's how you learn. Let yourself struggle a little bit, but don't let yourself struggle for days and then come to your manager and be like, I'm lost. Cause then they're like, what have you been doing the last few days? Like, you know, they want you to come to them with issues. So don't feel like you need to solve everything on your own. The people are there to help you. And as long as you keep a good balance of taking time to figure things out on your own and then asking, then no one's gonna notice.
Totally. And I think like I was just looking in the chat at what Sam just put in the chat. And you know, I think this kind of leads well into our next question, which is all four of you kind of spoken to how incredible the culture is, the engineering culture is at your current roles, and how great your teams are and how supportive it is. It can sometimes be sometimes be really hard to get a clear sense of what a company culture is like during the interview process. I mean, I love that question that Sam just threw in there. Like what an incredible question to ask, you know, an engineering manager or something like that, to see how they handle it. But do you have any tips for those joining us on how to get an idea of whether the company is welcoming to women and non-binary folks, and will support your growth, whether that be the management track or even just like a highly skilled individual contributor? Monica, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say my number one recommendation is off the bat, ask your recruiter for like a female interviewer, a non-binary interviewer, whoever it is that you want to speak to, ask them that up front. And even if there's not someone who's available to conduct your interview on that day, they are, if possible, likely to set you up with an extra conversation, hopefully a couple different conversations. And if not, then that's, you know, it could be a red flag. Then it's time to ask yourself, you know, do I really want to work at this company? But I would recommend that. I've had really good experiences with recruiters really trying to accommodate that request. And then also make sure, you know, go in with your questions. Think of this as you're going to be interviewing them in this situation, and make sure that you have sort of your bullet points of what you want to get out of that meeting.
I love that, Monica. Like, you're interviewing them. I think that's something that we always forget in interviews, right? It feels like, oh, I have to impress them. They have to impress you too. Does anyone else want to jump in? Taylor, Sam, Lucia?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So my first company out of Codesmith, as I mentioned, was a small startup, and I was the first and only woman at that time at the company. And that was something at first I was very apprehensive about. However, I had a friend of mine who worked at the company, and he and I had an opportunity there to really like pick his brain and ask some questions before I accepted. But I also asked excuse me, some pretty pointed questions in my interview, because as Monica just said, I was also interviewing them and asking them their plan, and as the company grew, how they were going to bring in more, honestly, like non-white dudes, because that's who was at the company. I didn't ask it like exactly like that, but I asked how their plans to like diversify the company moving forward, and I appreciated their answer. They weren't turned off by that. And so while being the only woman or one of the first women at a company is not necessarily an immediate red flag, asking that question is important, and seeing their answer is important. If they are kind of put off by that, that will be a red flag, in my view, at least. Also, a like more general tip is two more general tips. One is, when I was in the job search process, I was like very focused on companies overall that were doing something that that I felt good about, right? Like I wanted to feel good about the project and product that I was working on, and hoping that that would then in turn be an environment where I felt comfortable and accommodated as I was learning. Now that's not always the case, but that was one thing I looked at. The other thing that I found really useful is a website called Key Values. I'll look it up in a minute, but you can essentially, the woman who runs it, she has you answer questions or like pick fields that are like important to you as you're in a culture that you, for a company that you want to go interview with. And at the end, she like spits out a bunch of different questions you can ask in interviews that aren't, so if you're concerned about work-life balance, you don't ask what's your work-life balance like, because no one's going to be like, well, we're all work, right? Like you could ask something like, how often do team members respond to Slack after 6 p.m., right? And if they say all the time, then you know work-life balance probably isn't what I want it to be, if that's something that's important to you. So like finding the questions, like really prioritizing what is important to you in a company, and then asking the right questions in those interviews, I think is really key in helping decide if this team, if this company is right for you. And there were a few companies I weeded out early on in my interview process because I was like, this is not going to be the place for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. Lucia, Taylor?
Yeah, everyone said, I agree completely. And I love, Sam, what you're saying about not just asking about work-life balance, because I feel like I do that. And then I kind of gauge from what they say, like, you can tell when someone's lying, like, yeah, the work-life balance is great here. We, love that. You'll hear specific examples of like, yeah, it's really great. I actually just took a 2-week vacation to South Africa. That plug, I'm going next week. So it's really on my mind. And I'm able to take that vacation because of the work-life balance on my team. But yeah, and specifically, like Monica said, asking to speak to a woman, I always say, as a woman in engineering, I'm concerned about, I'm always more concerned about the environment that I'm going to be learning in. And I really want to make sure this is a supportive environment that I'm stepping into. So I want to speak to another woman to hear directly from her that experience. And if they don't have that to offer you, then say like, what are your plans to address this? What are your plans to build diverse teams in the future? And you can be kind of frank in these conversations, like, and say, I'm not looking to be the only woman on a team right now. That's not something I'm interested in. I'm not interested in having to educate the rest of the men on the team about how to behave, because that is detrimental to your learning and your career. I wouldn't say that exactly, but you know what I'm getting at. So yeah, asking to speak to women. I'm already losing the train on the question. I'm talking too long. Yeah. Yes, I'm gonna stop. I've said enough.
That was great. That was all super helpful, Taylor. Thanks so much. Lucia, you want to jump in on anything? I know you just recently must have interviewed for a new position. So how'd you gauge the culture?
Yeah. I think for me, the manager was really important because they're the people, the management and leadership, because they're the people that are going to be hiring most people and building their team. And so getting a gauge of like what their values are, why they're a manager, why they got into people management, kind of seeing if they're, normally I feel like they're going to have some component about wanting people in their team to grow, and that's a great sign. And I think also like the way that they express and like the like subtle cues can be a very telling thing. Honestly, I feel like if you connect with your manager, like it's kind of like a gut feeling that like this person's gonna care for me. I feel like at least I've gotten that a lot with people, that and that human to human connection, and doesn't have to be a female. I agree that like sometimes with female managers that can feel more natural. My first manager at Google was a woman, and I said to myself like, this person is to be a manager. But my future manager will be a man, and we still had like this like great connection. He seems really caring and supportive of my growth. I also asked him like why he thought it was a good fit for the team, and kind of understanding how he sees your role in the team was also really useful for me. But I'll report back on how it goes.
I mean, I hope it goes incredibly, Lucia. All right, we have one last question before we get into audience Q&A. I know that a lot of you have kind of mentioned mentorship or groups or things that existed to you within your company that maybe was helpful for you to find your own growth. And I believe too that just having like a strong network of female colleagues that are in similar roles to you can be really powerful, just even sharing that perspective. But are there any sort of like groups or channels or resources that maybe are external to your current job, since we don't all have access to those things, that you found really helpful in your own like looking for guidance and mentorship, or even just advice or doing research?
Well, of course, our podcast, Imposter, that one that has so much good advice. No, in all honesty, we Monica and I created the podcast at the beginning of last year just because we were craving that type of like supportive environment for women in tech, and also trying to break down that stigma of just when you are a woman in tech having to be this like perfect buttoned up, like just beacon of perfection, because those are the only women that get there, right? Like we wanted to show that women who have all kinds of interests and don't, Monica and I don't spend our weekends building side projects. Like that's just not our passion. We can enjoy our job and have a life outside of it. And so I think what we wanted to demystify that, just like, if you're an engineer, you need to be doing it 24/7. You're never going to learn. If I've had managers before tell me, like, if you really want to learn, you need to be doing side projects on the side. Like, what the heck am I doing for 8 hours during the day, sir? I don't know. So yeah, that's our plug for our podcast. You don't have to, being an engineer doesn't mean that that's your entire life. It's like such a small part of you. And it means so many different things. If you just have a curiosity to learn and you love problem solving, you're an engineer. It doesn't mean that you rebuilt a computer when you were 5 years old in your dad's basement. Like it has such a broad meaning. So don't forget that, and don't feel excluded from the environment because of that like narrative.
Awesome. Sam, Lucia, Monica, any other resources or things that you found really helpful, just for advice, guidance, all that good stuff?
Yeah, there was a group that I was a part of during my job search called Hire Tech Ladies, and they're a like job board and a social network group. At one point you had to pay a membership fee. I don't know if that's still the case. So there is unfortunately a cost to it, which can be a bar for some, I understand. But it was a really great environment just to connect with other women in the tech fields, whether it be like a product manager to other software devs. It ran the whole gamut, and that was really just a nice supportive group to be in. People would post about their interviews, whether they went well, went poorly, and just like lots of advice and stuff. So yeah, I would recommend that group, even if you're like getting started on your journey. I think that might be a good place to check out. It's called Hire Tech Ladies, and again, they posted the NPR job, so that's how I found it. So I am also super thankful for them for that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Sam.
Sure.
Monica, Lucia?
For me, some things that have worked is when I've been to talks and by someone that I felt really inspired by, or I thought that they were really awesome, or some woman, man in leadership that I was like, okay, this person could be a great mentor. Just like reaching out to them after and trying to form a connection. It doesn't always work, but I found that for me, sometimes like these like very formal kind of mentorship assignments can be tricky because you don't always get paired up with someone that you truly like really connect with and that you feel like they understand your situation, because even if someone's a woman doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to connect with them and they're going to understand your struggle or your situation. So if you do find someone in whatever, a team meeting, a broader whatever, someone in a walk in the park that you think is like great and you want to like, you think that they're interesting or whatever, I would just advise to like follow up and trying to create a relationship and kind of nurture that, and maybe set up monthly meetings or quarterly meetings or something, and kind of have those relationships on the side. And especially in times that that are hard, it's really nice to have kind of some people that, have your back or know you from before and can give you really great advice. And in general, it's just like nice to have those human connections.
Awesome.
One thing that I did when I was right out of boot camp and kind of looking around for my first jobs, I went to a ton of meetups, which hasn't been really feasible for the past couple of years, but I think that they're probably like coming back on the scene right now, in-person ones. And they would range, some of them would be more sort of like a couple hour or day long, like mini boot camp, or you basically go to learn a specific skill, or there's like a talk on it, just more on the more technical side. Others would be more specifically about like career growth. Some were just sort of like specifically networking events. And there were actually a lot, at least in Southern California, that seemed to be geared specifically towards women. I think that would probably be the same in any large city. So I would check out what's going on in your area and then just like show up.
I love that. That's great advice. And we are running just on time to get some Q&A started. So I have a couple of questions from the chat. Our first one is from Maria. She said, women are statistically less aggressive negotiators. What tips do you have to step up the negotiation game? Are there trainings, books, courses to try to squeeze the last drop of comp out of that recruiter or hiring manager? And I think, Taylor, you said in the chat that you might have some advice for this.
Yeah, I just have a quick thing that another lady software engineer gave me as a tip one time. Never give them numbers, never give the recruiter numbers. So you may think that, okay, I make X at my current job, so I'd be happy with that. I'll give them that number as a ballpark. No, don't give them a number. Say if a recruiter is like, what are you looking for to make in this job? You say something to the effect of like, I'd be willing to hear if you have what you have budgeted for this role, and I'll let you know if that falls within my expectations. And then you don't show your cards too early. You don't show because they could be budgeting for way over your ask, and now they're like, oh, we'll just give her that. That's all she's expecting. So that's the biggest way to shoot yourself in the foot. And just don't feel like just grateful for the job. Like, you have something to offer. They've hired you. They see something in you. They're not doing you a favor. They're paying you for your services. They've decided that you're going to be a good employee. So just try to shake that idea of like, oh, it's a good offer. This is fine enough. Like, this is more than I already make. Let's just do that. Always try to ask for more when you get that offer back. Ask for 10, 15K, tack it on. It just to get in the habit of it. Because they're never going to give you the best offer first. They're never going to give your best and final offer.
I also have a lot to add on this. I had never negotiated before an offer because at Google, they just kind of give you, Google is different because they just give you an offer and then that's the end of the story. Which, by the way, they ended up like increasing my salary 3 times before I joined for some strange reason that to this day I don't know. But anyway, that's a little bit different. But now to my new company, definitely 100% negotiate wherever you're going, unless it's like a super big tech and you're a new grad. In that case, like, I think you're not really that allowed. Maybe you are, I don't know. I didn't do it. But my advice for that is, one, when they initially give you the offer in the call, they normally do it virtually. Don't negotiate on the spot. Always go back and say something like, oh, I'll consider this offer and get back to you. And then do your research. Like, after that, just reach out if you're going to a startup, like see what, if there's Series A, Series B, Series C, talk to friends, look up in the internet, how much equity you should be getting, how much is the base salary you should be getting, what is the, industry standard for that position, and be really well informed in that. And then you can either go and get on another call or you can send them by email. I think personally for me, I sent my negotiations by email because I was getting nervous about doing this on a call with someone. And, sometimes they will ask to get on a call with you back. Sometimes they will just negotiate by email. I think just like make the playing field something that's comfortable for you and 100% negotiate. I know I didn't do this for my first job, so I'm kind of like backfiring what I said, but definitely negotiate. Like Taylor said, this can also be easier if you have a backup, like another option. So if you have more than one offer, you can be, more comfortable to negotiate because you know that otherwise you're going to go to this other place. Yeah, I think that's my TLDR of my experience changing jobs now.
Yeah, I've heard the advice of pick up the phone and call. That doesn't work for everyone. Some people are extremely uncomfortable doing that, and you might lose your nerve. So do, like Lucia was saying, like do what's comfortable for you. And in a case where they are not budging on salary, there are other things that you might be able to negotiate, including like paid time off, etc. So like think about the whole package as well. Like if the salary is like drawn in the sand, there might be other things that you can leverage and use to your advantage. Maybe it's like a one-time signing bonus. If you have to relocate for the job, I don't know if that's a thing anymore. It was 2 years ago when I accepted the job at NPR. I got a moving bonus. So like, yeah, there are other ways to negotiate if the salary is like hard and fast. Taylor, love the cat. Mine's sitting right here and I'm like having to fend him away from the screen.
He just tried to jump across my computer, so I had to put it down. A lot of software engineers have cats. I'm not saying it's a requirement, but if you have one, you're in good company.
Agreed.
Monica, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just one more thing. If you do find yourself in a like fortunate position where you have multiple offers, keep in mind that compensation obviously is a lot, but it's not everything. Most recently, I had an offer from Square and actually like a much better compensation package offered from another company. And it was really hard because, I was questioning, like, can I be bought? And a lot of days I thought the answer would be yes. But after speaking to my current manager before I accepted the offer and hearing about what the team was working on and all of the resources that they have available, and just knowing kind of what a large company is, what a footprint they have in like the open source world, especially for Android, it became clear that the better choice for where I wanted to go with my career was going to be going towards Square. So the compensation is really important, but if you feel specifically drawn to an offer that's maybe not quite there, but you think is going to be better long-term for your development, then I would seriously consider it.
I have one more quick tip. And if you're already interviewing, it's horrible as it is already, just tack a few more companies in there. So you're coming from like a place of surplus. You're not like, okay, I got to be really careful with my words with this one place because it's my dream place and the only place. If you add a few more companies, do a few more tech screens, then you start to see like, oh, okay, if I mess up on this one, it's going to be okay. Or I get an offer here. You could really come to the next place and say, I already have this offer. I need you to expedite my interview and I need you to meet me at this offer. So that's another way to even just give yourself a little less pressure. So you're not so precious about each interview.
Yeah, I love that. We have another question. This is from Angelique, and I know that Samantha and Taylor, you both did boot camps. Sam did Codesmith. Taylor did another one. Monica and Lucia, I don't think you did boot camps. Oh, Monica, you did.
I did worked on Hack Reactor.
Oh, amazing. Okay, great. So this question can be for the three of you. Lucia, you can sit this one out. But specifically as boot camp grads, do you feel that a boot camp alone prepared you enough to do well in your career in tech? Or are there any other resources that you would recommend when switching from a non-technical career over to coding?
I really thought hard about my decision to go to a boot camp because I quit my existing, stable job to do it and was unemployed for several months, just studying everything I needed to pass the test to get into the boot camp. But once I was in, I went straight from that into my first role. And I was interviewing at a couple places, but I ended up actually accepting an internship offer. It was paid, and it was paying more than I had ever made in any other career. So it seemed like a good enough deal. But I also took it as like a huge opportunity to learn. And so I, at least in the beginning, like I was putting in a lot of extra hours, and I was, you know, probably working much more than 8 hours a day and stressing myself out, probably a lot more than I needed to, but I did learn a whole lot that year. But no, I think that the boot camp very adequately prepared for that, because it's such a grind, you know. It's mine at least was 6 days a week, for like 12 hours a day. So I was already sort of in that like hustle mentality, where I knew that if I was able to just kind of like keep going and keep pushing myself a little further, that it would pay off a lot. And it did. And now I'm perfectly content, like shutting my computer at like 5 or 6 p.m.
Go for it. Whoever wants to go next.
You go, Taylor.
Okay. I was also a boot camper. It was called Dev Boot Camp in Chicago. It's out of business, RIP. But yeah, like a boot camp prepares you, but also you have barely scratched the surface. Like you really are not going to know that much, but it's okay, because the boot camp will give you the tools to learn. Like the boot camp kind of teaches you how to learn and how to sit in the discomfort of failing and having no idea what you're doing. And that's like the whole job. Even today, 6 years in, some days I'm like, I have no idea what that is. So that's like the nature of the job. And I wrote in the chat earlier, like, it's not your job you don't get hired to like know how to do everything. You get hired because they think you can figure it out. They think you're capable of learning and figuring things out. And just like Monica, I took an internship as my first job because I didn't feel like I was ready I just wanted to get in somewhere and learn and make it very clear that I wanted to learn. And I knew that I had very little experience, but I wanted to get in somewhere and learn. And I knew I could learn faster on the job than teaching myself. Some people do great teaching themselves, working on side projects on their own apps. I do not. I don't have the discipline for that. So I took an internship, same exact thing as Monica. It was paying me way more than any other role. So it's not even like it was a step back, and then luckily got hired from there. So I tend to recommend like going for internships or fellowships. But that's the boot camp that I came from, where I had no experience coming in. And so I'm still a fresh baby engineer coming out. So I knew I needed that extra help coming from an internship. But I know many people in Codesmith, and obviously Sam, you're going to talk about it, can go on and get full-time roles, no problem. So I'll kick it over to you, Sam.
Sam, you're muted.
I didn't. Yeah, sorry. I clicked the chat and not the mute. We're 2 years into this and I still can't figure Zoom out. Yeah, so I rolled pretty much from Codesmith into my first role. The role I landed was essentially the Codesmith tech stack. So I got really fortunate in that case, because I didn't have to really onboard any new technologies immediately out of the box. I got to just continue working in React and Express, which was lovely. And so I finished Codesmith in September and started that job in November. So it was a pretty decently quick turnaround. And then I started at NPR, and the 2 months later in February, I had applied for NPR before I accepted the other job, and they took a while to get back to me. And then when they called, I had to leave because it was NPR. But I had to, at NPR, learn Angular, which was not something I had experience with. And again, I was not even 6 months out of Codesmith. But like Taylor was saying, I learned how to learn, right? Like that's a really good thing that these boot camps will teach you to do, is like she said, sit in the discomfort, learn through it, push through it. And I think because of that experience, I was able to onboard Angular relatively quickly. And you're also going to learn on the job a lot. Like I had to go back and look at some code I wrote when I first started NPR 2 years ago. Let me tell you, it is not how I write code now. Like you will change a lot in even a couple of months once you've started somewhere. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's really about like how quickly you can internalize knowledge. I feel like because tech is always changing and there's always going to be a new framework, a new tool, a new language, all of those things. We are 1 minute over, but I think I want to go for one more question from the audience, just because I think it'll be a nice way for us to wrap up. From Jessica, she wants to know, if you could travel back in time, would you have done anything different on your path to where you are now? And obviously time travel is very theoretical, so you can take this to kind of just share anything you might change or any advice you want to impart on our audience before we wrap up.
For me, no. All my previous careers and experiences led me to Codesmith and to software engineering. And I don't know if I would have gotten here. Maybe I would have. I wouldn't have gotten here otherwise. And it's the best career I've had, the best job and best place I've worked. So for me, I'm just happy that I had those experiences to leverage, as I mentioned earlier, into this current role. So I have no regrets. There isn't anything I would change. Those have all been things that I've been able to carry into this career. So I'm grateful for that.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Taylor, Lucia, Monica, anyone want to jump in?
For me, it's not a specific thing, but it's more of a mentality. When I was in college, I studied electrical engineering and computer science, and I was definitely more focused on the engineering side. And I did my first line of code sophomore year of college, and I was very behind compared to kind of my other peers in software in computer science. And when I kind of started at Google, I had this mentality that like, oh my gosh, like this, I mean, classic imposter syndrome, like, and it took me, getting recognized internally in my job to kind of realize my value. And I think just like realizing that you can add a lot of value and you are like amazing and you can develop those skills to be super productive in your team. And just changing that mentality took me a little bit. And it was definitely not until I joined Google and got kind of promoted internally that I started shifting how I thought about myself.
I had the exact same experience. I really was looking to external validation because I had so much imposter syndrome. And I really just felt lucky to be where I was, when in reality, I was being hired because I was good and people could see that I had a lot of potential. I'm going to butcher this quote, but there's some quote that really resonated with me that was like, don't compare your first chapter with someone's last chapter. Something about your chapters are different. Like I would compare myself as a junior engineer to like the most senior person on the team with 15 years of experience and be like, oh, I'm not cut out for this. I'm never going to know as much as they know. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like you don't compare yourself to, don't try not to compare yourself to anyone, but certainly don't look to others and think, oh, I'm never going to get there. Like you'll get there.
I think I also would have, like, I wish I could take back some of the like late nights and weekends where I felt like I just had to figure something out. And usually like I would get some work done, but I was so burnt out and tired, I'd write really bad code. And then when I would actually go back and revisit it the next week, I'd have to redo everything anyway. So there is like a definite like bell curve in terms of productivity. And every time I think I've exceeded that, it's only cost me like more work and not less.
So true. When you like, don't try to muscle through it ever. When you're feeling frustrated and that you're like getting to your breaking point, take a break. Like often you'll find that if you go for a walk, like watch TV, your brain keeps working on the problem. It's the craziest thing. And then the answer comes to you. Like when it happens to you, you'll know what I'm talking about, but it's real.
Yeah, totally. I dreamed, I had a dream one night where I solved the problem and I woke up the next morning. I was like, yes, got it.
That's happened to me too, Sam. Or like I'll go to sleep and I don't know if I dreamed it, but I wake up and I sit back down at the computer and I'm like, oh, right, I can do this thing. Yeah. So yeah, your brain needs rest for sure. Remember that. Well, I want to say thank you so much to Taylor, Sam, Lucia, and Monica. It's so lovely to have you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your advice, your guidance with all of us.